Hello everyone, it's Sylvia from Feel Like Tarot. Welcome to my channel. I have a question for you. Are you a witch or are you a goddess? Okay, so the reason why I wanted to do a video in which I'm going to talk about the differences between goddess-related decks or goddess-inspired decks and witches-inspired decks is because I myself was very confused about the types of energies that you can use when working with one or the other types of decks. And I believe that we have been so fortunate lately as to find so many different options related to both of these thematics. And sometimes I think that there are a few decks that either don't belong to either category, so they're neither a goddess deck nor a witch deck, but they're something that is so powerfully feminine that I think it actually either embraces both of these two or it's a different category altogether. And so we'll have a look at those decks as well. Regardless of, if you work more with goddess energy or you work more with witch energy, or in some cases you can work with those two energies combined, or perhaps you want to switch from one energy to the other during the year, please understand that it's absolutely fine because you do you. This video was useful for myself first and foremost, I believe, and for the others out there that are still kind of not deciding between one energy or the other. But it's also because I felt like it would have been fun to just see out of the 500 plus decks that I have in my collection, which ones I definitely feel like they belong to one. Are they witch decks or are they goddess deck or are they, let's call it divine feminine decks? It's always been something that really interested me, and I don't think I've ever actually done some kind of a separation in my collection according to that. So we'll have a look. So I've gone through my entire collection and I kind of divided the decks into those three categories. I have to say, I don't have that many witches themed decks, which is very much surprising for me because I really vibe with that theme. But then again, it's true that it's probably because of the time of the year. So here in Australia right now, the time of filming at least, we are literally going through Samhain. So Samhain is, if you Google it, it will say it is the night between the 30th of April and the 1st of May. But because there's always a few degrees extra, year after year, they kind of accumulate. And at the end, I think this year we're actually lifting the veil on the 4th of May. It's either the 4th of May or the 5th of May. Apologies for that. But in any case, it is these days. So in the northern hemisphere, you are experiencing the bees and the flowers of Beltane and that sense of enthusiasm for creation that awaits you, whereas in the south we're just going through the darker days and wanting to curl up in front of a fire with a blanket and a book and a hot cocoa with our animals close to us or in our laps. It is a completely different kind of feel. There's definitely related to also the duration of the days. When you have more light, you feel like going more outside, and quite the opposite occurs when you have more darkness. But regardless of where you live, I think that perhaps there is a difference between Samhain related or darker days related witches and brighter days related witchery. I didn't do that kind of distinction, but because I feel that I'm more in tune with Samhain right now, I actually, I just brought up the Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle. This is the very first one that Rockpool has published, and it was probably 3, even 4 years ago, if I'm not wrong. This is the original trio, so Lorianne Anderson and Juliet Diaz, who wrote the book. And the illustrations were done initially by Jada Rose. They have Then after, I think Gimbal was the first one of these decks that was actually illustrated by someone else. I'm not going to talk about the difference in illustrations. I personally love both of them, and all of these decks I'm making sure to collect all of them because I absolutely love having them. And these one definitely give you that kind of witchy vibe. And when it's Samhain, as I was saying, I feel like I'm more prone to these kind of energies because of the time of the year. And I wonder, had I been filming this video perhaps in the Australian summer or the Australian spring, if I had, ultimately chosen the same kind of decks. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, these are very beautiful decks. They're very beautiful, they're very insightful, they're very useful as well, because being an oracle deck, you can actually use it in many different ways. We all know these kind of images. We've had, many of us have had this deck for a while now. We've been using it for a while. This is probably my third copy because it's probably because of where I used to live. I used to live in a very humid kind of house, and they all ended up being warped. I did not experience the same with other decks, just a few rock pool decks. It might be something related to the inks they're using, to the cardstock they're using, because I have been storing them in exactly the same conditions. However, I have moved to a much drier place now. And so I hope that this will be, the last copy that I have to purchase. I generally do not repurchase a deck just because it's warped, but these ones, whenever there's a Mind, Body, Spirit festival in Sydney, these ones are super discounted at the rock pool stand. They sell them for 3 for 60 Australian dollars. So that, makes it $20 a piece, which is basically 12 US dollars. So as you can imagine, it's really worth. And the other decks that I have, the warped one, I actually give them to someone who doesn't really mind about the warp. But this is definitely, if I were asked to pick a deck in my collection, regardless whether it's an oracle or a tarot deck, that really, let's say, really talks to me about witchery and witches, this is definitely it. And it's not just because it's called the Seasons of the Witch Oracles, but it is because it's the Samhain edition. But I also have tarot decks that remind me of those themes. And so this one is the Cozy Witch Tarot deck by Amanda Lovelace. The artwork is by Janina Medeiros. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. This deck, I always tell a story when I show this deck because I feel that it resonates for many of us. When we saw it the first time, especially if you're, if you're in your 40s or your 50s or your 60s, you look at this deck and you think, gee, I could be their mom. I could be these characters' mom because they look so incredibly young. They look like they're teenagers, and and it's a really beautiful deck. But that admittedly there has been a little bit of a stopping, not a deal breaker per se, because at the end of the day, I did buy the deck, but I could have bought it 6 months before I actually did, and the only reason why I did end up buying it was because it was on sale for, I think it was Black Friday? It might have been Black Friday. And it ended up costing me 12 Australian dollars, which is really less than the cost of a sandwich in Sydney. So as you can imagine, I was like, sandwich, not even a sandwich and a coffee, just a sandwich. And normally sandwiches go for like $14. So I was like, sandwich or deck? Deck. And so I started working with it, and I realized that even though there is not that much diversity when it comes to age, there is, however, when it comes to body shape, when it comes to skin color, but there is not that much diversity when it comes to age. But it feels like it's such an amazing reader that I actually don't mind. It is a beautiful deck, but I didn't know that before because I was looking at the art style and I always liked it. That was never a problem. But I felt like, am I going to use it when I look at these cards and I think that I could be literally their mom? And I found myself never asking myself that, literally thinking, this is a beautiful deck. It really speaks to me. It resonates. Sometimes it does have gray-haired, characters. I love that there's also ability diversification. They do have characters on wheelchairs in other decks as well, but it's always the one person. So it's in the Chariot, for example, or perhaps is one of the core cards. It is rare or more rare to see them in other kind of cards. For example, the Three of Cups in this case, I really, really appreciate to see this. My mom has been in a wheelchair for, well, practically my entire life. So I know everything about being in a wheelchair, and I know what it means, what it feels like, and seeing that these characters are breaking down barriers and they're still in a community, it's just really amazing for me. And I love puppy dogs. And of course, I love cats as well. There you go. So I really like this deck. And at the end of the day, as I said, I did not ask myself, oh, do I feel like their mom? Not even once while using it. I think it's really spot on. And I always appreciate, for example, the sentences at the bottom of the cards. Because I feel that they are also spot on, but they make it so that it's even, let's say, easier to relate to the cards or for the cards to resonate with you. This is definitely a witchy deck, though, not just because, and sorry, I should have pointed them out when I was going through the cards, but there's a lot of cards where there's indication, for example, that the witch is in, or, the Academy for Witches. There's a lot of signs, but there's also a lot of the witches familiars, for example. There's a lot of the cauldron and all of the beautiful tools that may be used by a witch. So it is definitely one of those decks that has witchy vibes, but because it's called the Cozy Witch Tarot deck, on the other hand, you can also definitely feel the easiness of the cards. Don't let that easiness fool you though, because it is, as I said, a sharpshooter, and in many, many cases, you will be surprised at how strong the message comes across, and it's also a really beautiful experience to be reading with them. Now, just to show you another couple of witchy decks that I've got, I'm just going to bring in the Compendium of Witches Oracle by Natasha Lincic. My apologies for the sun. Every time I film it this time in the morning, which is pretty much the only time of the day in which I can film, I have the sun coming through the blinds, even though the blinds are actually closed, so I don't know how else to do so. Maybe I should cover the window with a panel, but for now it is what it is, and the sun is always nice because these days are much darker than usual, so I don't actually mind it. So the Compendium of Witches Oracle, which I actually pair up with the tarot deck, which is this one here, the Witch Sister Tarot by Julia Jeffrey. And if this image rings a bell for you, it's because Julia Jeffrey is also the creator of the Tarot of the Hidden Realm, which showed a very similar kind of art style. I have to say though, and I've talked about this deck a couple of times on my channel already, it feels almost as if you already feel that the Tarot of the Hidden Realm was a really beautiful deck, this will blow your mind. It's so beautiful. It feels like the Hidden Realm was some kind of a stepping stone for Julia to actually get to the point of creating the Witch Sister Tarot. I just want to show them to you together with the Compendium of Witches. They are not, all right, one is produced by Llewellyn, which is this one here, the Witch Sister. This one is an oracle deck that has been released by Los Carabeo. It is a deluxe oracle deck because, as you can probably remember, Los Carabeo doesn't produce more than 32 to 34 cards when it comes to an oracle deck. This one instead has got, I think, 44, if not more cards. 60 cards, hallelujah. Thank you, Los Carabeo. I'm always very pleased when I see that they do something, you know, nice like this. That's giving us 60 cards. Although I have to say, out of these 60 cards, the reason why there's so many is because these cards are related to famous witches or historical characters, you know, of pretty much the whole world. I don't think there's a geographic limitation. It's also because they're mostly referred back to archetypes. So the shaman, for example, we don't have. Well, we used to have shamans in Europe. But in any case, it's something that it's really encompassing all of the archetypes that we may think of, and it's got a really, really beautiful art style. Absolutely love the color palette as well. But I wanted to draw your attention to the fact that this is definitely much less cards. If I put them together like that, or so I didn't actually check this. It looks like it's only, it could be 30 and 30, but I think it's actually 28 and 32, and I could be wrong. It just feels like there's 2 cards more on this deck. So this is related to pretty much all we talked about before. So witches familiars, or, you know, witches tool, witchy related items. It is beautiful. I love it. I would have preferred the setup to be more like this deck, because then I would have not have any problem in shuffling these 2 in together and using them regardless of the fact that they belong to one deck or the other. When there's a white background, which is completely different from the background of the other deck, it almost feels as if you need to use them separately. I don't know if that makes any sense. I would prefer them to be more similar. I don't think that it's a huge problem, and as a matter of fact, I do like to use them separate, so that's fair enough. I love that we have these kind of similarities between the art style and the color palette of the Witch Sister Tarot and the Companion of Witches Oracle. For now, I'm just going to show you as a pairing these 2 like that. And let me tell you, this has been a really gorgeous type of exercise, pairing up these 2 together. It's also because the origin of this video is because I really wanted to try and understand the differences between working with goddess energies and working with witches energies. I don't need to be explained the difference between a goddess and a witch. Sometimes a witch could become a goddess, and sometimes a goddess has been a witch. What I wanted to really make a distinction between where the energies and the ways in which we can use or channel these 2 energies in our practice. So I don't know whether I explained that at the beginning, or correctly explained that at the beginning of the video, but this is literally for me and for everyone else that may be confused about these 2 types of work or practices. This is literally just to try and understand if I prefer one type of theme to the other. For now, we're looking at the witches decks, and these 2, as I was saying, these 2 actually have that kind of vibe, that witchy vibe that I was seeking, and it's so strong coming out of especially the Witch Sister Tarot, but also the Companion of Witches. But I feel like because they pair up so well together, they become almost as if it were one deck. And so obviously we're talking about archetypes when it comes to the Oracle. And so you will, or in my case, I had to go back to the guidebook every now and then just to make sure that I wasn't misunderstanding the cards. Obviously, when we have a card that says the seer, and like in this case, really witchy looking, and we look at the cards that are on the side. So we've got the Witch of Skies on the left, and we got the Fool on the right. And this is all, it tells you about this journey, this fool's journey, which is going towards becoming a seer. And the seer, it's even more so because it's the Witch of Skies that we see here. So Skies has been renamed after the Suit of Swords. So obviously we're talking about the suit of the mind, and we're talking about that sense of movement of thought that the suit of the mind seems to be pointing at. And when we talk about the fool's journey to achieving that sense of seeing potential and power, we look at this kind of transformation and we understand how should we relate to the cards themselves. So when we pull 3 cards like this, what is our own interpretation? If it's a general reading, for example, we understand that someone has started on their journey to become more attuned with themselves and their peculiarities and their powerful instincts. And throughout this journey, they will learn, perhaps by getting in touch with other similar kindred spirits, they will learn to get in touch with their inner intuition, but also they will learn to translate that in such a way that they will become the seer. The seer is not just the person that understands the message, it's also the person that has learned how to translate it back and relate it back to everyone else. That is the duty of a seer. That's something that people tend to forget, but a seer is supposed to do a job. It has a duty to actually disclose these messages that they see, that they perceive. And so this pull, if it comes to your, if you pull these cards in your own readings, that's definitely an exciting step forward in your personal journey to, become what you truly are. And so you can definitely feel there's that witchy kind of energy that is actually embodied and manifested in the transformation. I love to think of witches as alchemists because, as we know, traditionally speaking, witches are always very close to nature, and the way in which they look at nature, they live in nature and they live through nature as well, points to the fact that there's this symbiotic relationship. And so using nature or having nature on our side is very much, to me, that identifies the life of a witch. So every single step that we take in this journey is because we want to commune with what's around us in the most natural way. And it also brings us back to a primordial state of existence and knowledge, which is very much developed into witchy kind of themes. If you think about witches' histories, or even if we don't think about legends, for example, there's always this idea of these women and men, very, very. Perhaps they look a bit different from others. Perhaps they have this, more natural kind of appearance. They always are depicted in nature, though, and that's something that really contradistinguishes for me this kind of theme. So if you're uncertain, if you're unsure whether a deck is witchy or has witchy vibes, I definitely recommend have a look at how the characters relate to nature. Do they gain strength from nature? Is nature a natural environment for them where they feel at ease, where they feel like they can definitely recharge and reconnect? So these two definitely witchy decks. And I have to say, when it comes to decks, I do have other witchy decks, of course, but these ones are the ones that most express what to me represent the vibes that distinguish a witchy deck from a goddess deck from a divine feminine deck. But now I want to talk about goddess decks. And the reason why I felt like it was something that needed to be explained is because in many cases, I feel that the tarot community has a bit of a gap. There's a bit of a gap, and I'm not saying that in any kind of accusatory manner. It's just that I've seen with my own eyes that there's a there's a lot of production, a lot of decks released that have perhaps the witchy vibe, or the magical vibe, or when we're talking about RWS, obviously, and they need to be fully scenic. But when it comes to goddesses, there seems to be a little bit of confusion. And I think that there's a lot of witches tarot, for example. But when it comes to tarot decks, there's not that many goddesses, and actual goddesses, not as in powerful women. Please, let's make a distinction right here. So when I'm talking about goddesses, I'm talking about for example, Freya from the Norse mythology, or Gaia or Hestia. So I'm talking about goddesses that at least have a mythological origin or a historical origin, and that are universally recognized as goddesses. I understand that there's a lot of tarot decks that talk about goddesses as in we women can become goddesses. I absolutely believe in that, and I'm not saying that any one of us cannot become or is not a goddess, but just for the purpose of simplifying this video and the choices that I was going through when I was picking out my decks, I'm a little referring back to, as I said, goddesses that have a mythological or historical origin. And this is the Dark Goddess Tarot. And it might be something that is just in my collection, but it is the only tarot deck that I've got that is actually focusing on goddesses. So there's 78 cards, and these are all goddesses, and I would say historical characters. So Circe or Circe, for example, Sekhmet, Maat, Lorelei, Durga, Gaia, and so on and so forth, Vesta, Epona, Keridwen. So if you're not familiar with this deck, this is a deck by Ellen Lorenzi Prince. It's a really beautiful deck. This deck is the mass market edition of the original indie. I have to say the indie deck looks a lot better. It's first and foremost is not a glossy cardstock, a glossy finish, but the biggest difference I believe between the indie edition and the mass market one is that we have in the mass market these banners where we can find the name of the particular goddess or spirit. And personally, I'm not crazy about them. I feel that they cut into the artwork, which is really a pity because in some cases it's just the sky, so I don't necessarily mind. But in other cases, as you can see in Isis here, it actually literally clips one of the wings. When it comes to, for example, Baba Yaga, I don't know if I can find it here, but I remember thinking I would never dare to do something like that to Baba Yaga, but it's literally clipping her hair, I think, and you don't want to mess with the Baba Yaga. There you go. So it really goes close. I cannot see now. I would have to zoom in, and I'm not wearing my reading glasses right now. I think that it just doesn't. Maybe it just skirts the hair. But in any case, you don't want to mess with the Baba Yaga. If you have to mess with a goddess, don't do it with the Baba Yaga. That's a really strong advice that I may have. So as you can see, we got the Black Madonna as well, Freya, Pele, Ran, Oya. So there's a lot of oracle decks for sure that are based on goddesses and spirits, but in my collection at least I only have this one and the Chris Balder deck about goddesses. And out of 500 plus decks, it's actually not that many. And so I was wondering whether it was because it's rather difficult to associate the cards to a goddess and the particular power of those goddesses. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why we only have, let's say, not as many as we have for witches. Because obviously, when we're going through goddesses and their names and their stories and their origins and everything, there's always a bit of a theme coming up. So they are relative to death, for example, or to war, or to beauty, or to love, etc. And so you need to find, out of the 78 cards of a tarot deck, you need to find the one that actually corresponds to that keyword. And I think that that might not be the most simple thing to do. Because of that, I highly appreciate the work done by Ellen in this deck. I wish I had the indie deck because the cardstock is also better. However, the indie deck didn't come with the guidebook, and I find that the guidebook to this deck is absolutely necessary to understand everything related to the goddesses. However, I've got excellent news for you, because only just yesterday, or at least yesterday at the time of filming, so on the 1st of May, Johanna Poller has actually launched the campaign, the Kickstarter campaign for her deck, which is called the European Goddesses and Spirits Oracle deck. And she has been so nice as to send me a prototype copy, a demo copy of this deck in advance for me to review. I've already shown this deck in a couple of videos and a couple of posts on Instagram. I think that by now you all know how much I love this deck and how much I enjoy using it. I have to say, at the time of filming this deck, this campaign has been fully funded, so the goal has been reached, I think, by 200%, so, you know, twice as much. So this is definitely becoming a reality. There's hundreds of backers. I am so very pleased that the campaign went so well, because I think it got fully funded after not long that it was launched. I think it was launched on European time, so obviously you would have had the US coming just after that, and the Australian, you know, in the morning probably. So this is one of those decks that it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for you to actually get in touch with all of these goddesses and spirits. So Johanna was actually saying that she had to call the deck Goddesses and Spirits because there's not just goddesses in the traditional term of the word. And I actually agree with that, because you would have seen that in the other deck that I was showing earlier, the Dark Goddess, for example, there's, you know, the Baba Yaga, but Baba Yaga is not traditionally seen as a goddess. I do, however, appreciate the importance of the Baba Yaga, and so I would have been really sad not to have a tarot deck about goddesses that didn't feature the Baba Yaga. So the Baba Yaga is featured in the European Goddesses and Spirits. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that Johanna wanted to talk about, and she wanted to create a deck, an oracle deck that she was comfortable with, and so that was themed, or that was focused on a culture that, geographically speaking, was speaking to her. So obviously her origins, Johanna is from Germany, so her origins were very important to her. And as we always say, if you're a writer, you've heard this numerous times before, always write about what you know, because if you start writing about something you don't know, you embark upon a lot of risks, and it becomes difficult. But it's also because things may not resonate with you as much. So being European myself, I find that this deck is pretty much resonating with my origins, with my way of feeling like a European person. And I absolutely love going through the guidebook. So this is not the guidebook, this is the companion book. I think it's an add-on that you can purchase as well, you know, in the campaign. And if you can afford it, I highly recommend it, because it's a fantastic production. You have so much knowledge coming out of these pages, and you know, it's also really beautiful because you have a full page with the character depicted on the card. And I think that when we have these kind of instruments and tools at our disposal, it becomes almost a pleasure, you know, an adventure to actually use them together with the deck. For one, I'm someone who's always recommended using the guidebooks or the companion books, not necessarily because I don't know the decks, although in this case I would have had to go back to the guidebook anyway, because I do know Freya, of course, but I'm not familiar entirely with all of these goddesses and spirits. But it's also because you want to know what the creator was thinking when they were choosing these images and these characters to produce the cards. And so it's a very interesting insight on the creator's manifestation and intention. So I highly recommend the companion book. However, because I understand that it is obviously it comes at a higher price if you purchase the deck and the companion book. I have to say that if you want, you can just buy the deck, and inside the deck you will have this that it's not a little white book, but I don't know how else to call it. It's a booklet, so let's put it this way. It does have smaller font, so what happens is that you do have most of the information you would find in the companion book, except for the practices that are recommended, even though in here you can actually find some journaling prompts. So it is very interesting. It doesn't have the images, as you can see, but that's because it's practical and it wants to contain as much information as possible. So this deck, let me just say, I actually really enjoy it. The art style is amazing. The color palette is fantastic. I really resonate with these characters. I believe that the way in which they're portrayed in the companion book or also the guidebook, it is really spot on with the keywords. And I have been, see, I love that. We have that's the Baba Yaga right there. So I love that once I went through them, it was easier, for example, to recognize them, let's put it this way, for when I was looking at the characters that I don't necessarily know. Now, there's some things to say. I've already explained this in the other couple of videos where I was talking about this deck, but I feel that it merits an explanation when it talks about the European goddesses. Obviously, we're talking about Caucasian goddesses because that is the main ethnicity you find in Europe, and as such, you will not find a lot of skin color diversity. However, you do find in this deck plenty of age diversity. And when it comes to body shape diversity, it's kind of difficult to tell because these goddesses, you don't see them in their full body, you see just the upper part of their body. So it's kind of difficult, if you know what I mean, to understand whether there's body type diversity or not. But I find that I'm absolutely fine with the way in which these characters have been depicted. I'm actually really admiring this art style. As I was saying, I find it very communicative, very talkative. And I love the fact that there's also differences in colors when it comes to the borders, for example. And these borders don't feel obtrusive. They're actually there for a reason. They contain the images, they frame them, but they also are decorative elements. So I really, really like them. And I just wanted to show you because the other times I was showing this deck in combination with the Blood Moon Tarot, and I got a lot of comments on that saying that they pair up and it's a fantastic pair, but I wanted to show you that they actually pair up really well with the other decks as well. So one deck that I really love using with the European Goddesses and Spirits Oracle cards is the Mythos Tarot by Helena Elias. This is by Rockpool. It's a fairly recent publication, I reckon probably 6 to 8 months ago. I have to say this deck has grown on me because at the beginning I was a bit upset that it's almost Photoshop beautiful characters, and you will know what I mean when we look at them. There is a gender diversity, which I'm very appreciative of, but when it comes to body type, body shape, and age diversity, we don't have as much. However, I do understand what the intent and what the idea behind this deck was. So there's a lot of close-ups. I would say 99% of these cards have close-ups. So you don't necessarily see the full-size person. What I do want to draw your attention to is the fact that there's a lot of communication coming out of the expressions on the characters, and that's what I actually appreciate about this deck. So we see, for example, in here the Three of Wands with Ananke. And I remember, see my journey, I have absolutely no problems in pointing this out. When I first talked about this deck, I was actually saying that I don't believe that this is the Three of Wands when the character is actually turning back towards us, almost as if it were an afterthought and just, instead of going ahead. I think that the Three of Wands is the person that doesn't even look back because they're actually going, the wheels are in motion, they're almost jumping off that cliff because they want to join the ships, and it really speaks to the character of the card of the Three of Wands. However, by using this deck, I realized that this card is actually telling me a different way to read the Three of Wands. This is the person that has found themselves at a certain point in their lives, because as you can see, and this is noticeable because there's not that much age diversity, and this is not a young person. It tells me that perhaps this person has been doing everything that was required of them, and they found themselves in a situation at 50 or 60 or 70 in which they realized that they never really chosen what they wanted for themselves. And so there is a kind of a sense of challenge in this card, because there is still the sense of going forward, because there is a raised hand here. It communicates the sense of dynamism and movement, but at the same time there is a challenge. This person is looking back, at me, at the reader, or at someone else, by saying, watch me, because now I'm actually going to do what I want. I'm actually going to go where I want. And I absolutely love that I can see this in this deck. And if you watch my channel, you will know how important it is for me to have a deck that gives me the opportunity to look at the cards in a different way. I really love this, and I'm so very grateful to this deck because of this, because from now on, after 36 years of reading tarot, the Three of Wands will have an additional meaning for me. I just love that. So I want to show you how beautiful these two are together. There's, as I always say, there's echoes and resonances between the cards. In some cases, there's really similar color palettes. The borders are very similar as well. Obviously, we're talking about, European goddesses and spirits here, and this is the Mythos Tarot, which is obviously based on Greek mythology, so we're in the same geographical area. There's also, in many cases, what's noticeable is the directionality, because the cards or the characters on the cards don't always look or break the fourth wall and look at you, the reader. Sometimes they look at each other, and that's very nice to notice, for example. Obviously, it is not the same art style, but it doesn't matter. I really feel that there's this sense of communication. There's these messages that are going back and forth between the two. And this brings me to the, let's say, what I wanted to talk about in this video in specific, which is not just about showing you my goddesses or my witchy decks. I believe that when we work with a goddess type of energy, and in this case, I know that this is also including spirits, but let's just to simplify, let's talk about goddesses. We're actually reaching to a part of ourselves, which is, it kind of brings about a lineage. So it feels almost as if we descend from these goddesses and spirits. We bring with us the potential of recreating in our own time the feats that they made them famous, or let's say the acts of courage they are known for. And obviously, it depends on which goddess you're focusing on, because there's a few, Circe, we say that Circe in Italian, it's Circe in English, but she was responsible for stranding Ulysses in his trip back home that lasted for like a million years. And basically, she was trying everything that was possible for her. She was a witch. which is ironic because in this case she was a witch, but she is, portrayed in a goddess and spirits oracle. But it makes sense because to me, Cerce or Circe is in between those two kind of energies. Because she was a witch and she was acting as a witch, but at the same time, she lived in a world full of gods because we're talking about Greek mythology. And also, it does give you, as a archetype in this case, it does give you the possibility to relate to what she's done. It gives you the possibility, for example, to use that kind of empathy. And that's how I create the bridge with the Queen of Cups. In this case, is Phoebe. But we can definitely see the emotion or emotional element of the Queen of Cups translating into Circe or Circe. And the Knight of Cups is especially good in this case because if you don't know the story, Circe actually fell in love with Ulysses, and that's why she wanted to keep him there. And with the Knight of Cups in this case is Morpheus, but we can definitely feel that vibe of the Knight of Cups in the story. So I really like the way in which these two decks together give you the possibility to understand when reading what your role could be by relating yourself to the legends of or the feats, as I was saying before, the acts of courage that these goddesses and spirits are famous for. So if you don't know the Sigyn, for example, or Keriwen, or all of the goddesses, I highly recommend reading at least the Little White Book. If you don't have the companion book, because these stories are incredibly beautiful. But it's also nice to see that they're very diversified in the sense that there's a couple of Dutch goddesses there, there's a couple of Finnish goddesses there. And so it's nice to see that there's also geographical diversity in the deck as well. So just a couple more just to show you how beautiful. Branwen with the Soteria and Prometheus, the Seven of Wands, and the necessity to stand up for yourself, that sense of resilience, but it's also the sense of stubbornness because it is in the suit of fire, and the suit of wands is suit of fire. And the Hangman, it's Prometheus, because Prometheus himself, the legend goes that he wanted to give fire to humans. He stole fire from the god to give it to humans, and he actually had to pay very dearly because of that act of insubordination. So there's these themes that come up, from the tarot cards. But Branwen, for example, is very much associated with courage, but also with the power of healing because of a compassionate mind, a compassionate soul. As you can see, you can tell this compassion that comes out of Branwen because of these birds and the care with which she's trying to heal a wounded bird. And so this is a goddess that comes from the Welsh mythology. So how interesting is that we find a way to put in common, Soteria and Prometheus and Branwen, because they speak about, first of all, I love to see, for example, that Soteria is holding a bunny. So there is also this act of compassion and protection that comes out of both cards. But it's also that sense of protection, compassion, and healing comes from Prometheus, because Prometheus, having done what he's done, it literally saved humankind. Because by giving humans the possibility to use fire, he's basically kicked off a kind of an evolution that never stopped ever since, let's say. So I really love to see when cards like this, even though they do point to different characters, they still really read really well together. So let's have a look at another few cards just to keep on showing you how beautiful these two are together. I really love using them. And I have to say, by the way, the Mythos Tarot has got a very strong masculine kind of energy, as opposed to just exclusively feminine energy. So I really like this kind of integration because it feels like it's even more balanced when you use these two decks together. So as I said, this is the European Goddesses and Spirits Oracle deck. It's a campaign on Kickstarter, which is active right now. So I'll make sure to put the link in the description box below, just in case you want to check it out or you want to back the deck. And this is the Mythos Tarot. And these are the one decks that I wanted to talk about when talking about the difference between witchy vibes and goddesses vibes. So to me, as we said, witchy vibes are all about being in touch with nature, feeling that your essence and your intuition are already there with you, and embarking upon that journey into becoming your own core self, thanks to the the natural world around you. Whereas, for example, the goddesses deck really give you the possibility to relate to the goddess that you pull, the specific goddesses that you pull, and finding your way to that true self through the lineage, through the experience, and reenacting those acts of courage that made these goddesses famous. But I also wanted to talk about another category. And to me, as I was saying at the beginning of the video, the divine feminine has a very special place. So to me, it's something distinct from the witchy vibe or some decks and the goddesses vibes of other decks. But sometimes it almost feels as if it were a combination of the two. So when it comes to divine feminine, I don't actually have that many decks, especially when it comes to tarot decks. I do, however, have a couple. So when it comes to oracle decks, I've got the Wisdom of the Divine Feminine deck and the Wild and Sacred Feminine deck. And I also have a tarot deck I do have. It's the Sacred She Tarot by Madeva Padma. And good news, we're actually, with my members, we're actually going to start doing a Down the Rabbit Hole deep dive or deck study about this deck. And we're also going to see how it relates to Madhava Padma's previous deck, which is the Osho Zen Tarot, because I really believe that they share similar vibes, but they're also kind of different in many aspects. So it's going to be a very exciting study. So if you want to join us, you'll be more than welcome. It's going to be so much fun. It is a growing family, a growing community. There's also a Facebook group, so you will be able to interact and post your own thoughts and pictures if you want. So check it out. It's very affordable. So the Sacred She Tarot, let's talk about this deck first, because as I was saying before, I have absolutely no problem in saying that sometimes I change my mind when it comes to a deck. And when I saw this deck first, I wasn't entirely sure about it because I felt that somehow it wanted to be very similar to the Osho Zen, but then again, there is one Osho Zen, and it's a unique deck, and I don't necessarily need another one. But then the more I started using it, and especially the more I started going through the guidebook, which is this one here, I felt like there was an entire new world that was opening up to me, and I changed my mind completely when it comes to this deck. I think that it's very unique. The art style may be similar, but that's very common. If you have different decks from the same creator, you may recognize the art style, which is absolutely fine. Absolutely. I have, for example, Anna Turians, I have all of her decks bar one. And I think that her art style is very recognizable, especially when you look at the Bones Stone Earth, Flesh, the Tarot Arturian, and the Tarot of Echoes. But at the same time, those don't feel necessarily like the same deck to me. It's just the same or similar art style. It creates a bridge. It's actually a good thing. I really love this deck now. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I look at the images and I remember what I read about, not all of them because I haven't used it that much yet, but this was a very similar feeling to when I started knowing more about the Osho Zen Tarot. And again, I don't want to draw too many parallels between the two. This is its own deck. But the feeling is very similar to me. And it's a feeling of coming home. It's a feeling of recognizing. It's a feeling of being seen. And so I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate the opportunity to do this deep dive with my members. I also really love the fact that The renaming on these cards is very spot on, almost as if the renaming was a bit of a keywords kind of exercise. So you'll know what I mean. Basically, in many cases, when you have a renaming, it makes the deck less accessible. And what I mean with that is especially related to the renaming of core cards and sometimes also of the majors. The renaming of the minors is not necessarily a problem because you will still be able to recognize what this card is, for example, with the color and the number. So the color gray is associated with the suit of the mind, which is the suit of swords, and the number 8. So we're talking about the 8 of swords or the 8 of air. And we see also I think these are bars. But I absolutely love that the keyword, or at least the title in here, is the word blame, because it is part of what I believe is a cage of our own making. When we blame ourselves for something without necessarily having all of the information that we need, that's what we're doing. We're putting our own self in a cage. So I really, really like and I really appreciate the way in which the cards have been renamed. In some cases, for example, the Ten of Swords is renamed Grief. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's also the beauty of a deck. I mean, when we look at a deck and we agree 100%, and there's absolutely nothing that we would read in a different way, that doesn't bring anything new to our knowledge. It doesn't give me an additional layer of interpretation to the cards. It's when there's differences that I want to understand more. I want to see, okay, if I think something completely different other than the keywords in this deck, in this card, why am I so far off, or why is the deck so far off from my point of view? And is the keyword on the deck important? Is it worth considering or not? So I really look forward to doing a deep dive of this deck. As I said before, when there's so much that you can actually learn from a deck, it's always welcome to me. And I know that a lot of people have made comments about the cardstock. I have to say, I'm okay with the cardstock. My deck, though, I bought it in Italy, so this is probably a different publication. So I don't know. In any case, this one is by Beyond Worlds, Atria. Sorry, this is too small, I can't read it. But in any case, so this is the publisher. I don't know whether the people who have a flimsy cardstock have a different publisher. I don't know. This feels okay to me. It is on the thinner side, but it's very smooth. The finish is very smooth. It doesn't feel flimsy at all. It feels like it's an actually durable deck. However, I do have to say, in the interest of disclosure, that when you riffle and bridge shuffle, the decks stay in that position with a bit of a bow. You correct it. So if you bridge shuffle, you have to riffle, sorry, the opposite. If you riffle shuffle, you have to bridge shuffle in order to correct the bow. Don't just do one or the other, because it will not work. Do you see what I mean? This is such the wisdom keeper for the Hierophant. Yes, traditions. Obviously, it is one of the keywords that you would associate in general with the Hierophant. But by choosing this keyword, it's almost as if it were an invitation by the creator, to follow along and to focus on that keyword related to the card and see where it takes you. Or, the power in this case for the king. This is the king of air, so the king of swords, and it's got the power. And I don't even here, to me, power is something related to pentacles, because it's something concrete, it's something that you can definitely touch, whereas the suit of air is referring to something more related to the mind. So as opposed to power, I would say the keyword for the king of swords is more like expertise, or scientist, or the philosopher. But I like the possibility to be proven wrong. I mean, we're here because we want to improve our knowledge, not because we want to repeat the same things over and over again. And that's my point. I love when an RWS is a clone. Fine, fantastic. And perhaps I want to buy it. I want it in my collection because it's got really beautiful art style. But when you get a deck that is not just pleasing because aesthetically it's pleasing, but it's also challenging your knowledge. It's telling you, well, you've seen this card and you read it this way for 36 years. Well, I'll tell you what, right now I'm actually challenging you to read it in a different way. Honesty, for example, for this is the page of Pentacles or, Earth. And that's, yeah, absolutely, it's beautiful. I mean, I like to understand why the creator thought of honesty as a keyword for the Page of Pentacles. Some others are more obvious, like the change for the Wheel of Fortune, fair enough. So I am so excited about this deck. It looks really, really beautiful, and it's going to be a really nice adventure. So this is the one tarot deck that I've got that talks about the divine or the sacred feminine or the sacred chi. When it comes to oracle decks, as I was showing you earlier, I've got these two. So the wild and sacred feminine deck and the wisdom of the divine feminine. Now, one is by Shambhala Productions, which is this one. So it's mass market. You can actually purchase on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles or, your physical or your metaphysical store. Whereas the wisdom of the divine feminine, unfortunately, is an indie deck. It is very affordable for an indie deck. I believe it's $45 US, which is, if you know the prices of indie decks these days, you will go, oh yeah, that's affordable. And it comes with a really nice guidebook that I'm just going to show you. So it does have a little bit of information about the card, and you've got some prompts for contemplation of journaling, or also a suggestion for a ritual. It's a very powerful deck, I have to say that it's a very intense deck. Now, if you know these two decks, so the wisdom of the divine feminine and the wisdom of the shadow, you will definitely know that the wisdom of the shadow is even stronger, is even more powerful, and probably even more intense. However, this is rather intense as well. I really love the combination of colors, for example. These are very saturated colors. These are colors that, even being vibrant like that, they don't actually clash, even though you do have colors on the different side of the spectrum. And it is a really nice, rather simple, but very nice art style. As you can see, it does remind me in some cases of Stella Conway's Devas of Creation. And I've actually tried pairing these two up together, but it doesn't really work because so this deck is about the divine feminine, and that gives me the opportunity to talk about the reason why these decks are here in this video today. We wanted to distinguish the witchy vibes from the goddesses vibes. And I believe that this deck sits in between those two vibes, but it does surge up to a category on its own, which is the divine feminine. How do I work with the divine feminine? So personally, I think that it's such a powerful deck, and generally speaking, all the divine feminine decks are very intense and powerful that I cannot actually use them every day. I don't journal with this deck unless it's for a very specific purpose and it's part of a ritual. When I journal, as in daily journals, I need a more subtle kind of deck because I also need to be, let's put it this way, I don't always want to be challenged, and I feel that this deck is on the rather challenging nature. It is challenging us to be more open about our own femininity, which I absolutely approve of and understand. But at the same time, it also pushes down some boundaries that unfortunately all of us at a certain point or other in our lives have to put up. So when we are challenged to tear down with fierceness those boundaries, we need to have the necessary time to recuperate, for example. We need to be in a safe space, and we don't always are in a safe space, or sometimes we're busy because we're doing, other stuff. We're living our lives. We have to pay taxes. We have to work. We have to clean the house. We have to feed the kittens and everything. So I believe that the way in which I work, and I invite you to please let me know in the comments below if you recognize this type of work with yourself, it resonates with you or not. If you use these decks in a different way, let me know, because I'm always curious about what other readers or collectors do in their own practice. But these kind of decks, the Divine Feminine decks, for me, they're not everyday decks, and they do require that safe space around me in order to be able to, if I'm challenged to bring down a few barriers, then I know that I'm doing so in a very safe manner. So that is, let's say, looking back at the way in which I described the other decks, we talked about the Witchy decks, and the Witchy decks is all about being in touch with your core self and your intuition and being a natural being. And the goddesses were all about this lineage and recognizing what their acts of courage or, what they were famous for, and understanding their archetypes and manifesting their archetypes in our own times. These decks, however, are so powerful. They have such a strong flame inside of them that I feel like they are very useful, but just once in a while. And so it is very interesting and I have to say something about this deck in specific. I feel that this deck and I never really connected, and I'm actually rehoming this deck soon. I'm passing it on to one of my members. And there's really only good feelings with this deck, in the sense that when the few times in which I was using it, I felt like I was the one that was misunderstanding the right time to use this deck. And I never really found the right way to use it, the right time to use it. And I was really trying hard. At a certain point, though, I saw this deck on a net channel from a Project Refine Life, the Wild and Sacred Feminine deck. And I got this deck and I started using it. And I have to say, this deck has completely replaced this deck. So let's talk about this deck, because this is also very similar when it comes to the concept of feminine power or divine feminine. The guidebook is very, very useful. For example, it's full of information, very interesting. It's fully colored, as you can see. However, I have to say that this deck was originally published as an independent deck, and I know it for a fact because I think Don Michel actually made a comparison video between the indie deck and the mass market one, which is the one I have. I think that there are several cards that are actually different. So I don't remember which ones, but and it's not like one deck has more cards than the other. I think that they might probably have the same amount of cards. It's just that they have different cards. So it would be interesting to have also the indie when it comes to this deck. So one thing that I have to say about this deck, it is definitely in that category that we're talking about before, so that divine power, divine feminine, because at the same time it looks at goddesses and spirits. You can see Bodhisattva here. Bodhisattva is part of Buddhism, and it believes to be the soul that actually reached nirvana, but instead of staying in nirvana, they decide to go back into the world to help out others achieve nirvana. So the awakening, the crone with the wisdom, or the curandera with the healing, or the river with surrender. This is so beautiful. It reminds me a lot of Lorelei. The mystic devotion, Amaterasu with beauty. There's also a lot about Amaterasu. It's the myth of cunning deception, for example, or using one's beauty for destruction. This reminds me a lot of one of the ways in which we can read the Seven of Swords, but it's a totally different video, so maybe one day I'll talk about that. But this is a really beautiful story. Whale with memory, lotus with resilience, a deer with gentleness. So I believe, I don't know if this deck gives you the same vibe that it gives me, but this is a much kinder deck than the Wisdom of the Divine Feminine. It's a more compassionate deck, and I feel like right now, at the time in my life in which I find myself, I actually need more, and I work definitely a lot more with this deck rather than a more intense or challenging, also provocative kind of deck. And so this is, it doesn't mean that maybe one day I won't go back to the Wisdom of the Divine Feminine, and if so, you know, I will purchase it. I'm happy to purchase it again. It's absolutely fine. But at the same time, I feel like when I'm reaching out for a deck that really does give me these kind of vibes, this is the one I reach out for. And I also want to say that it pairs up really, really well, for example, with the Sacred She Tarot, and also with the Self-Love Tarot. Sorry, let me just, because it's larger, so I need to make sure that it fits in the frame. Let's see. Yeah, we're here. So as you can see, the color palette is very similar. There's also similar kind of art style, not exactly the same. I have to say that there's also a bit less cohesion in the Sacred She as there was in the Osho Zen Tarot. But I really love it. It's an evolution, and you see that. And for example, you've got spontaneity, and in here we got an owl, here we got a koala, and here we got what looks like an eagle and a jaguar. So I love the fact that we can actually look at the animal presence in these cards, because there's definitely some echoes there. And, you know, the raven with magic between the Seven of Cups and the Three of Pentacles. You see how well these two pair together. It's just, it's the way in which you feel the communication going. You have to be a witness to this kind of conversation that is happening at the same time between the cards. And I always love it when this happens, because it feels like you're being part of something unique and something wonderful that is, you know, happening right in front of you. So I'm really looking forward to use these two decks together, because I have the feeling, and again, please understand, this is just my practice. This is the way in which I approach these kind of vibes, and it may be completely different for you. It may resonate, but it may not resonate with you. And I kindly invite you to let me know what your way of working with these energies is, because I'm always on the lookout for something new, a new type of practice, for example, to adopt in my own tarot life. I really, really appreciate these two together. And just another couple of cards just to show you how beautiful these are. And so we got Artemis with the Untamed, between the Dream Weaver and the Power. How beautiful is that? So that was it for today. We talked about these three different kind of energies, because as I said at the beginning, I really felt like there's a bit of, from my part, there was a bit of confusion on what, you know, what kind of vibe the Goddesses decks give me, and the Witchy decks, and the Divine Feminine decks. And I don't know whether I made it a little bit more clear in this video. It certainly is more clear for myself, so I call that a win. But in any case, thanks so much for being here with me till the end of this video. More to come. Have a great day.